welcome back. Right, the Nan movie is written by Catherine Tate and Brett Goldstein. It stars Catherine Tate, Matthew Horn, Nikki Wardley, and Catherine Parkinson. And it's directed by, well, that's the thing. It doesn't have a director's credit. This has been pointed out in several places since the film was released a week or so ago. And it's interesting that this is a film which has had a troubled history. Originally, when it was announced a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, it was going to be called A Nan's Life, and it was going to be the origin of this character. If you don't know the character of Nan, Joni Taylor, she is one of the characters created by Catherine Tate for her sketch show back in the early 2000s. I've always been a fan of Catherine Tate. I think she's got fantastic comic timing in her facial expressions and her gestures, and she has an innate understanding of people. And what she did in the sketch show, she created several characters. I'm thinking of people like Lauren, the bolshy, am I bothered teenager, and Nan particularly, the grotesque, intolerant grandmother who just spoke her mind. She created those two characters extremes of stereotypes of what we think of as that sort of chavvy, early 21st century, I know better than you type schoolgirl teenager character, and Nan, the exaggeration of the exasperated, frustrated, intolerant grandmother figure. And that's what those characters did, and that's why they were very successful within the limitations of the sketch show. When the sketch show finished in 2007, Nan had a sort of an afterlife. She appeared in several of her own specials. She's cropped up in charity things here and there. I don't think as a character she's quite as popular as the BBC and particularly Catherine Tate might necessarily think so. She's a character that people are aware of, and I think people do either like her or they find her distasteful. And I think that's one of the issues about this particular film before I go on to discuss what was clearly a troubled history of the making of the film. I think that if you like Catherine Tate and if you like Nan, then you will find things to enjoy in this film. If you don't like particularly the Nan character, you might like Catherine Tate but find that there's something about Nan that doesn't chime with you, you're not going to like this film. You're going to hate it. You're going to detest it. You're going to find it irritating. You're probably not going to find it funny. And I think that's what's happened with a lot of the reviews, the critics' reviews that have come out, who have just given it no stars or 1 star. People who've probably never seen Catherine Tate's comedy show. They've probably never heard of Nan. They've just gone in to see this, what they class as a vulgar, crass British comedy film, spin-off of a TV character, and just dismissed it as something like the Keith Lemon film, or the Mrs. Brown's Boys, the movie. But there's actually more to it than that. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, this was originally going to be a Nan origin story set in the 1940s. It was sort of how Nan became the cantankerous old crab that we know in the modern day. It was directed initially by Josie Burke. Now, the film was completed a couple of years ago and sat on the shelf. Didn't come out during the pandemic because so many films were sort of shelved, and this just sort of sat there unreleased. I understand that what happened, a cut of the film was given to the studio, which focused a lot more on the backstory of Nan, with the road movie element, which forms the sort of bit that encircles the historical bit, was a sort of a lesser part of the plot. Apparently the studio, a bit concerned that audiences would want to see Nan, wanted the film to be restructured, so there was more modern day Nan stuff with less of the historical stuff. And that has led to a film which feels a bit schizophrenic. It feels as if it's two films, which it is really, I suppose. It feels as if it's two films that have been rather artlessly sort of jammed together and made to fit. And the way they tried to make it fit is by some dreadful animation sequences. I don't really get what they were thinking of. The animation is really crude, very bad. Sort of photographs, superimposed onto arts or drawn images for things from the film. It's just really bad, and that sort of betrays the problems that the film has had. But I quite enjoyed this. I mean, I like Catherine Tate. I do think she's a fantastic and actually underrated comedy talent. I've been a fan of her since the Catherine Tate show, and of course she was fantastic as Donna in Doctor Who, but that's not a prejudice towards her because I'm a Doctor Who fan. It's not that I think that she's sacred and can do no wrong, because she can. But I think that this film has been wrongly maligned in lots of places. I mean, as I've said, the thing is, if you don't like Nan, you're not going to like this film. But I think it's actually a bit smarter than it's been be given credit for in lots of ways, but it's also been compromised by the fact that it's had to be made into something it probably wasn't always going to be. The story basically of the film is that Nan gets a letter from her estranged sister Nell, played by Catherine Parkinson. They haven't met since the war. They fell out for some reason, and she tells Nan that she's dying and she wants to sort of be reunited to sort of, make up for what's happened in the past. Nan wants none of it, but her grandson Jamie, played with the usual sort of wide-eyed exhaustion and huge patience by Matthew Horn, takes her on a trip in his van. He works for sort of a charity doing sort of touchy-feely mental health things. And they get aboard this van, which is itself the subject of an extremely crass joke, which is sort of amusing, but they keep sort of hammering home, look at what these words are on the side of this van. Anyway, they go on a road trip. She doesn't want to go anywhere near Ireland. Her sister lives in an island off of Ireland, which is one of the repeated memes of the film. So she says that she'll go on the road trip. She basically wants to avoid her neighbours who are having a party that she doesn't want to attend because she thinks it's a sort of swingers party. It's all very convoluted and silly, really. So she agrees to go with him. She wants to go to a day spa thing in Coventry. He contrives to deceive her and they end up in Liverpool on the way to Ireland. On the way, she tells him the backstory of why she and Nell fell out, which leads to a number of actually very sweet and well-realised flashback sequences set during World War II when Nan is much younger. Catherine Parkinson, who's brilliant as well, plays the young Nell, and they are these two young sisters who are their father dies at a young age and they're left to sort of fend for them, not exactly fend for themselves, but sort of keep the family together. And one of the things that her father said before he died was, to Joni, Nan, look after Nell. And they do everything together. They set up a little market stall and they scrimp and save and try and do things together. They go to a dance during the war. There's lots of American GIs. And this one particular GI takes a shine to Joni. Nell doesn't like that. She sort of elbows her way in. And eventually she sort of drives a wedge between them and she ends up with the GI by means of a deception that Joni does not take well to. And they sort of part acrimoniously and they don't meet again. And basically the backstory. Now, these scenes are really very nice. They're quite dramatic. There's not a lot of sort of the broad humour of the Nan side. It really isn't there, which does make it slightly lopsided because you've got this quite dramatic wartime stuff and then this high lowbrow farce of a lot of the Nan stuff. But I really like those scenes in the wartime. Catherine Tate again showing what a great. There's one really good dramatic scene where she sort of lashes out, which is really very dramatic. She acts it really well because it's dramatic, but she brings in little elements of like Nan's laugh that's there with her as a younger woman. But then the Nan stuff is the road trip, which descends into that sort of slightly vulgar, farcical stuff that you often get in spin-offs from TV series. Some of the exploits that she and Jamie get up to are just not exactly gross, but they're sort of eye-rollingly, they're quite funny. I mean, when they get to Liverpool, Nan, by various reasons, ends up going to a rave with a bunch of sort of yobbish rugby player types, and she accidentally takes a tablet, and Catherine Tate acts that sort of her being spaced out really well. It's very funny. And then later on, in a very bizarre sequence, when they get to Ireland and they go to an Irish bar, and she meets up with this plausible Irish bloke who turns out to be an eco-terrorist who wants to bomb a chicken farm. And it goes off into this strange distraction and it becomes larger than life. And that's emphasised by the fact that the wartime stuff has been so good. And there are nice little moments with Nan and Jamie that are quite sweet. But it's got this odd balance that makes it seem, it sways one way, then it sways another. But overall, I laughed quite a lot because I like Catherine Tate and I've always got that sort of, I'm always rooting for her because I just think she's such a good performer. And I think that she and Matthew Horn are a good partnership. But I sort of quite enjoyed it, really. I went in thinking, is this really going to be as bad as the critics have said? And no, it isn't. But I said the critics have got their agenda that they don't know much about this character. They probably, it's not their sort of film. So it's not a critic's film. It really isn't a critic's film. It's a film for fans of this character, fans of Catherine Tate. One of the problems, of course, is that we've had a lot of films based on comedy series over the years. Going back to the 70s, we had a massive raft of comedy films based on TV series at the time. Most of them weren't very good. They were shadows of the TV series, because it's always a challenge to stretch something which works as half an hour, then to make it work as a 90-minute thing, because you have to broaden it, you have to have a plot, you have to have other characters, you have to make it bigger. And that doesn't always work. But it sort of does in this. It's worked for me because I just like that duality of it, but it doesn't sit well. I was more interested in the wartime stuff. That was so well done and very well put together. So all in all, it really isn't as bad as you may have heard. But like I say, the proviso is, if you don't like Catherine Tate, you don't like the character, then don't bother. I don't see why you would, because it's clearly not going to be for you. It's just going to irritate you 3 times as long as an episode of Nan. There are some odd things about the sort of, which are either production things that happened in this peculiar edit or not. If you think about it, the flashback sequences are set in 1944, 1945, and with no disrespect to Catherine Tate, she's supposed to be portraying Joni in the 20s, 30 maybe, which means that she would have been born in 1914, which means that Nan is now 106, 108. And that, that doesn't make any kind of sense, really. And there's a sequence in Liverpool where she goes clubbing with these blokes, and she leaves a note on a card across Jamie's chest saying, "Gone clubbing." And he wakes up and it's 4:05 in the morning. So he runs through the streets of Liverpool to try and find her. But the streets are full of people shopping, shops are open, there's traffic. I think there's a few little bits and pieces like that which emphasise the fact that this was film hacked about in the edit. Certain that scene might have made more sense in an original edit, but the way it's been compromised is the word I keep using. I think that there's certain odd things about it. There's another scene, for example, when Nikki Wardley appears. She's another regular Catherine Tate show actor. She appears as a traffic warden in Liverpool. Now, she's supposed to be a woman who worked for the council who crossed swords with Nan and lost her job. I don't know if that's a reference to an earlier Nan sketch or an episode. I'm not that well versed in Nan law. But she now is a traffic warden, and by a ridiculous coincidence, Nan and Jamie arrive in Liverpool and pull up outside this hostel, and this woman is there conveniently as a glorified traffic warden. And she instantly swears revenge on Nan. And then she becomes like the villain of the piece, which is just a bit silly. She's following them everywhere. There's a sequence where she appears to be standing in the same place outside this hostel for hours and hours, because they go into the hostel, they go to bed, then Nan gets up, she joins up with these party goers, then she goes to a club, and when they come back to the club hours later, she's still standing in the same place. So I think there's certain things where the edit shows the problems that this film has had reaching the screen. And those are things that, you sort of pick up on watching and think, oh, that's sort of a bit weird. But they're sort of minor little things. But I think they're things that do underscore the fact that this was obviously a troubled production. And this is obviously why Josie Rourke's name isn't on the director's... there's no director's credit, as I mentioned. I don't know if I mentioned earlier. It was directed by Josie Rourke, who's quite a well-known theatrical director. And I suspect that she directed most of the historical stuff, which is really done with a really nice eye for framing and, atmosphere. And then the comedy stuff, I don't know who directed that. I just don't know. Nobody seems to know. But that schizophrenic nature of the film sort of runs through it. But it doesn't scupper it completely for me, because, like I say, I enjoyed it. I do like the Nan character. I think she's got that sort of... speaks her mind, which I think a lot of people don't like to do these days because they're afraid to be cancelled and vilified. But she's, it's very un-PC, I have to say. There's lots of jokes that you think people would, the easily offended crowd will be up in arms. Oh, you can't say that. But Nan just says it. That's the whole point of the character. So anyway, I enjoyed it. It's not a classic film, of course it's not. But for a spin-off TV comedy, I think it was perfectly agreeable, perfectly enjoyable, perfectly acceptable. I dare say now any credibility I've got as a film commentator has gone right out the window. But what the hell? What a flaming liberty. It's the Nan movies in cinemas now. You know what? I'm going to give it 6.5 out of 10. I think it probably deserves a 7, to be honest, because I think that Catherine Tate really makes it. But I'm going to give it 6.5 out of 10 because I just had a good time. And I didn't come out thinking, oh my God, that was a disaster. I didn't get bored with it. I didn't find it exasperating. I just thought it was a bit of a laugh, which, I was in the mood for. Anyway, that's Catherine Tate's Nan movie in cinemas now. Go and see it if you're there. All right, thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, do the usual like and subscribe. Press that button. Thumbs up, comment, and all that crap. Right, I will see you soon. I got a couple of retro movie reviews coming up soon. I'll be doing a review of the first episode of Moon Knight and odds and sods coming up soon. So don't forget. Until I see you next time. Yeah, keep taking the stuff.